Jamie O'Connor and Tariq Hassan weren't street thugs. They were the architects of Liverpool's most sophisticated cocaine network. For months, their operation ran like clockwork, moving millions of pounds worth of drugs across the UK. But it wasn't guns or gangs that brought them down. It was a single spreadsheet, a digital ledger that recorded every deal, every shipment, every secret, waiting for the investigators brave enough to follow the numbers. This is the story of how numbers exposed the underworld, and how the hunt for 3 million pounds of cocaine uncovered the hidden heart of a criminal empire. In the heart of Liverpool, a city long known for its bustling ports and historic streets, detectives stumbled upon something that initially seemed mundane: a laptop abandoned in a low-rent apartment above a closed-down pub. At first glance, the device appeared ordinary, the kind of old machine filled with outdated software and forgotten files. But hidden among mundane documents and personal photos was a single spreadsheet. It was nondescript, a simple table of numbers and names, rows and columns stretching far beyond what the eye could immediately process. To an untrained observer, it might have seemed like someone's attempt to keep track of their finances, an accountant's private record, or a hobbyist's obsession with lists. Detectives initially approached it cautiously, unsure if it held any significance. But as analysts started to sift through the entries, a pattern began to emerge that sent chills through the investigation team. Dates aligned with unusual banking transactions, often in small amounts that seemed inconsequential alone, but formed a complex web when seen together. Locations listed were seemingly random, referencing streets and warehouses across the city. But cross-referencing them with law enforcement intelligence revealed an unsettling connection. Each one corresponded to reported drug activity, specifically cocaine movements. The spreadsheet wasn't just recording numbers, it was documenting an entire criminal operation in meticulous detail. The realization hit slowly at first. Criminals had always relied on cash and trust, often avoiding documentation to remain invisible. But this spreadsheet suggested something different. An unprecedented level of organization. Every shipment, every contact, every payment was logged as though the traffickers themselves were creating their own internal ledger, confident that their system would never be discovered. Unlike cryptic notes or coded symbols scrawled hastily in notebooks, this spreadsheet was clean, structured, and precise. The entries traced the flow of cocaine from Liverpool's docks through the city, then outward to other regions of the United Kingdom. Analysts could see patterns forming, how shipments were timed, how money moved, and how the operation maintained control over multiple hubs simultaneously. As the investigation deepened, the stakes became increasingly clear. Each number represented more than just currency. It symbolized real-world shipments, criminal risk, and potential violence. Every row was a silent witness to the underworld's reach, a record of who moved what, where, and for how much. The sheer audacity of the traffickers keeping such detailed records of illegal activity was astonishing, but it was also their greatest vulnerability. Law enforcement realized that if they could decode the full meaning of the spreadsheet, they would have a roadmap into one of Liverpool's most organized criminal networks. A network whose operations extended far beyond city limits and threatened communities across the country. The spreadsheet also hinted at a sophistication rarely seen in street-level crime. It referenced accounts offshore, shell companies disguised as legitimate businesses, and coded notations that suggested encrypted communication methods were in play. This was no ordinary gang. This was a network operating like a multinational corporation, relying on technology and accounting methods to maintain secrecy while moving millions in cocaine undetected. Detectives could feel the tension rising as they worked, understanding that every step toward unraveling this digital ledger was also a step into the shadows of a network that would protect its secrets at all costs. By the end of the first week, the team knew that this spreadsheet was a rare opportunity, an inside look at the mechanics of a criminal empire. It promised answers, but demanded caution. One wrong move, one leaked detail, and the traffickers could disappear, leaving the investigators with nothing but encrypted numbers and missed chances. Liverpool's underworld had left its trail not in graffiti or whispered rumors, but in the quiet rows of a spreadsheet, waiting for someone brave enough, or perhaps reckless enough to follow the numbers to the truth. As detectives continued to trace the spreadsheet, the operation's scale began to reveal itself in ways that were both shocking and unsettling. What initially seemed like a local Liverpool problem quickly grew into something far larger. Each row in the spreadsheet corresponded not only to transactions within the city, but also to contacts and shipments in Manchester, Birmingham, and London. The network stretched across the country, with each city functioning as a node in an intricate web of cocaine distribution. It wasn't chaos that organized these criminals. It was a system as precise as any corporate supply chain. Each movement of drugs was logged, each payment recorded, each handoff coordinated with clockwork timing. Analysts pored over the data, linking the spreadsheet entries to intercepted communications, minor surveillance reports, and financial anomalies. The patterns were undeniable. In Manchester, small warehouses received deliveries at odd hours, often late at night, matching the dates in the ledger. Birmingham's entries corresponded to retail distribution hubs, and in London, luxury apartments served as temporary storage before shipments were broken down for further dispersal. It became clear that Liverpool was just the starting point, the origin of a carefully managed pipeline that allowed millions of pounds worth of cocaine to move across England with minimal interference. The financial side of the network was even more revealing. The ledger documented offshore accounts, coded bank transfers, and shell companies that appeared legitimate on the surface. Millions of pounds moved under the guise of everyday business transactions. Consultancy fees, import-export invoices, even fake real estate deals. Each entry hinted at a level of sophistication rarely seen outside multinational corporations. These were not impulsive criminals working street corners. They were organized, meticulous, and deeply aware of how to exploit the gaps in the system. For law enforcement, it was both a treasure trove and a puzzle. Every new connection brought them closer to dismantling the operation, but also highlighted the complexity and reach of the network. What made the network particularly dangerous was how interconnected it was. Each node relied on the others, and communication between cities was tightly controlled. Messages were often encrypted or disguised as mundane correspondence, making surveillance difficult, yet the ledger revealed the hidden structure behind the facade. By mapping shipments, investigators could anticipate movements, predict meeting points, and understand how different parts of the operation relied on one another. It was like watching the veins of a living organism, each part pumping drugs and cash through a coordinated system. The stakes became painfully real when authorities realized that every shipment logged in the spreadsheet represented not just money, but people who risked imprisonment, violence, or worse. The ledger recorded precise weights of cocaine, deadlines for delivery, and payment schedules that ensured traffickers could maintain strict control over their operations. It was a chilling reminder of the scale and cold efficiency with which lives could be manipulated for profit. In the midst of the investigation, a breakthrough came from an unexpected angle. One of the spreadsheet's entries referenced a Liverpool warehouse that had been under suspicion for months. Investigators discovered that this location was a critical transit point for shipments moving to other cities. Surveillance at the warehouse revealed a flurry of activity, confirming the ledger's accuracy. It became clear that the spreadsheet was not a casual record. It was a master plan, a living map of criminal operations that had guided traffickers for months, possibly years. By the end of the chapter, investigators had a growing sense of both triumph and dread. The ledger had unveiled a network of criminals operating with near-military precision, and Liverpool was only one hub among many. Every new discovery brought them closer to dismantling a 3 million pound cocaine operation. Yet each revelation also highlighted the cunning and reach of a system that could easily slip through their fingers. The underworld was no longer a shadowy rumor. It was a sprawling, organized network, and the spreadsheet was the key to exposing it before it could strike again. As the investigation progressed, detectives realized that uncovering the financial and logistical patterns of the network was only half the battle. The other half lay in cracking the encrypted communications that had kept this operation running smoothly for so long. The traffickers were not careless. They relied on encrypted messaging apps, coded emails and seemingly innocent social media posts to relay critical information. At first, the messages appeared meaningless, random strings of letters, numbers and symbols that seemed indecipherable to anyone outside the network. But the more analysts examined the patterns, the more they understood the system's logic. Each code corresponded to locations, weights of cocaine and times for pickups or deliveries. Every seemingly trivial detail had a hidden significance. Detectives quickly realized that the ledger and the encrypted messages were two halves of the same puzzle. The spreadsheet tracked the physical and financial side of the operation, while the coded communications ensured that the right people received the right instructions at the right time. The challenge was immense. One wrong interpretation could compromise the investigation or tip off the criminals, allowing shipments to disappear without a trace. Analysts worked tirelessly, cross-referencing entries in the spreadsheet with intercepted communications, searching for patterns that would reveal the encryption key. Each breakthrough felt incremental, but it gradually chipped away at the network's protective layer. Then, a critical breakthrough came from an unexpected angle. One of the spreadsheet's entries referred to a minor accountant who had access to certain internal files but had never fully realized the scale of the operation he was involved in. This accountant, unlike the senior members, was careless with some of his digital records. When authorities approached him, he cooperated quietly, providing access to files that revealed the structure of the coded messages and the sequence in which instructions were transmitted. Suddenly, what had seemed like random letters and numbers began to make sense. The encrypted communications were meticulously tied to dates, shipment volumes, and delivery route. Each code was a precise instruction, a layer of control over the operation that allowed traffickers to maintain order across multiple cities. With the encryption partially cracked, investigators discovered that one sized machine, capable of rerouting shipments, shifting accounts and replacing personnel if the pressure became too high. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered more surprising details. The ledger and communications showed that the traffickers maintained contingency plans, including secondary delivery routes and backup accounts for payments. The criminals anticipated disruptions, and the level of foresight in their planning was astonishing. It became clear that catching them required not just observation but precise timing and coordination. Authorities had to act like the traffickers themselves, predicting moves and staying one step ahead. The investigation now hung in a delicate balance. The combination of the ledger and decrypted communications provided an unprecedented view into the underworld. Yet it also revealed how easily the entire operation could adapt. One mistake by the investigators could alert the network and scatter months of intelligence to the wind. Each discovery felt like walking a tightrope over a chasm. The closer they got to exposing the 3 million ton shipment, the higher the stakes became. The encrypted messages, once indecipherable, had now become a guide, but a guide that demanded caution, precision, and nerves of steel. By the end of this phase, detectives understood the true scope of what they were up against. The network was not just organized, it was intelligent, adaptive, and ruthless. The ledger had opened the door, the encryption had revealed the corridors, and now the investigators had to navigate the shadowy maze with absolute care. Failure was not an option, because behind every row of numbers and every string of code lay not just drugs and money, but the risk of lives being lost or ruined in the pursuit of power. Armed with decrypted communications and the detailed spreadsheet, authorities began planning a coordinated operation that would strike at the heart of Liverpool's cocaine network. It wasn't a simple raid. This was the culmination of months of painstaking intelligence gathering, mapping every shipment, tracing every offshore payment, and predicting the movements of the traffickers. The city itself became a chessboard, with investigators positioning surveillance teams across docks, warehouses, and residential areas, each location carefully monitored to ensure that no shipment could slip through unnoticed. Timing was critical. The spreadsheet had revealed precise windows for deliveries, and the authorities knew that even a few hours' delay could mean the difference between success and failure. Surveillance revealed an extraordinary level of organization within the criminal operation. Trucks arrived at warehouses in strict rotation, drivers appearing and disappearing almost like clockwork. Teams of men offloaded cargo swiftly and quietly, while contacts in other cities confirmed the shipments via encrypted messages. It was an intricate dance of logistics and risk management, executed with almost corporate precision. Yet the ledger had exposed the blueprint of this choreography. Investigators could now anticipate movements, prepare intercepts, and identify the individuals responsible for each step of the process. What had once been an invisible network operating in the shadows was now, finally, within their reach. The operation unfolded over several nights, each phase executed with precision. Early in the evening, surveillance teams followed a convey from a Liverpool warehouse to suburban safehouses. Authorities documented the handoffs meticulously, confirming the shipment's weight and destination. The ledger's entries matched every observed movement, proving its accuracy and revealing just how much the traffickers had relied on it themselves. Each intercepted toll, each decrypted message, added another layer to the operation's intelligence, allowing officers to anticipate the traffickers' next moves. Tension ran high as investigators closed in on the primary warehouse. The building itself was unremarkable, an old industrial space in a quiet neighborhood, but inside it held hundreds of kilograms of cocaine and stacks of cash. Authorities had to move with care. Any hint of a leak could send the criminals scattering, potentially allowing millions of pounds worth of drugs to escape. When the raid finally commenced, the team executed it with surgical precision, entering from multiple points, securing exits and detaining individuals according to the carefully compiled intelligence. The scene inside the warehouse was both shocking and surreal. Piles of cocaine were stacked with military-like order, and dozens of phones, laptops, and documents revealed the scale and sophistication of the operation. Officers discovered additional spreadsheets and coded messages, confirming that the network extended beyond Liverpool, with contacts in multiple UK cities ready to mobilize at a moment's notice. The 3 million-ton shipment was seized intact, but the ledger revealed that some consignments had already moved to other hubs. Not every trafficker was present, and several key figures had vanished, slipping into the shadows before authorities could reach them. Even as arrests were made and assets seized, the ledger continued to reveal its secrets. Analysts traced offshore accounts, shell companies, and financial flows that stretched beyond the UK, highlighting the network's reach and the challenge of fully dismantling it. While Liverpool's operation had been disrupted, it was clear that other nodes remained active, capable of restarting the flow of drugs with alarming efficiency. The authorities had won a significant battle, but the war was far from over. By the end of the raids, the impact was undeniable. The operation had seized millions in drugs and cash, arrested dozens of individuals, and dismantled critical aspects of the Liverpool hub. Yet the ledger served as a stark reminder that the underworld's power was rooted in meticulous planning, adaptability, and intelligence. For law enforcement, it was both a victory and a warning. Even when the operation appeared successful, the network's depth and sophistication ensured that vigilance was essential. Liverpool had been hit, but the lessons learned from the spreadsheet and encrypted communications would shape every future effort to confront a criminal enterprise that had thrived in the shadows for far too long. In the wake of the raids, Liverpool was left with a sense of both relief and unease. The streets no longer buzzed with the same shadowy activity, at least for the moment, and dozens of traffickers were behind bars. The seized drugs, cash, and records represented a significant victory for law enforcement. But the ledger, the quiet, unassuming spreadsheet that had guided the investigation, continued to cast a long shadow. It had exposed the inner workings of a criminal empire, revealing not only the scale of operations but also the intelligence, planning, and ruthless efficiency with which the network had functioned. As authorities combed through the confiscated files, they discovered that the spreadsheet had been more than a tool for record-keeping. It had been a central nervous system for the network, coordinating shipments, payments, and communications across multiple cities. The ledger documented hundreds of transactions, detailing routes, contacts, and offshore financial flows with a precision that rivaled legitimate corporations. Analysts could trace the money, the drugs, and even the personnel involved in the operation. What had initially seemed like a simple document became a window into a sprawling criminal ecosystem, one that stretched far beyond Liverpool and threatened communities across the UK. The arrests and seizures were only part of the story. Court cases followed, each one revealing more about the network and its methods. Testimonies from lower-level accomplices and insiders corroborated the information in the ledger, showing how the traffickers maintained control through a combination of intimidation, discipline, and careful planning. Prosecutors used the spreadsheet as a central piece of evidence, explaining to juries how each entry represented real-world shipments, money, and operations. It was a rare example of digital forensic work translating directly into courtroom success. Convictions followed, and significant prison sentences were handed down, yet it became clear that some of the network's leaders had evaded capture. Their absence reminded authorities that even a perfect plan once exposed could not guarantee the complete collapse of a criminal enterprise. Beyond the legal consequences, the ledger left a lasting impact on law enforcement practices. Analysts and investigators studied it to understand the mechanics of organized crime in the digital age. It demonstrated how modern traffickers relied not just on violence or secrecy, but on meticulous record-keeping, encrypted communication, and offshore financial systems to operate with near impunity. The spreadsheet became a case study, a teaching tool for officers confronting similar operations in other cities. It highlighted the importance of technology, data analysis, and patience in dismantling sophisticated criminal networks. Yet, the ledger also served as a cautionary tale. For all the lives it helped protect by enabling the seizures of drugs and cash, it reminded investigators that crime could evolve as quickly as the methods used to fight it. The network's adaptability had been evident throughout the investigation. Contingency plans, backup routes, and coded messages ensured that even when one hub was compromised, others could continue functioning. Authorities understood that vigilance was essential, and that the lessons learned in Liverpool would need to be applied continuously to prevent similar operations from flourishing elsewhere. In the end, the story of the Liverpool Underworld Ledger was about more than cocaine, money, or arrests. It was about the intersection of criminal ingenuity and law enforcement persistence, about how ordinary tools, a spreadsheet, encrypted files, offshore accounts, could become instruments of both crime and justice. It showed that even in the shadows of a city, where deals are struck in silence and secrecy is prized above all, a single document could illuminate the hidden structures that allow such networks to thrive. The ledger remained a symbol of both danger and discovery, a reminder that in the digital age, the underworld is often as calculated as it is ruthless, and that even the smallest piece